Ladies and gents, welcome to UX, and this is why China's economy is stalling by channel TLDR News Global. Yeah, I know some of you don't like this channel, but I guess I don't know. Like, comment down the alternative if you want me to react to something. I don't know. Like, just saying this is not a decent channel. Like, I don't know what to do with that one. Yeah, people have been telling, but then again, like this happens every year. Oh, China's economy is dying, and it never does. Is it actually stalling, and what is it stalling if it's like 20 trillion or something, right? It's at 20 trillion right now, something like that. Okay, so yeah, obviously, like the TLDR news is like really graph-esque channel who's going to talk about many different type of graphs and things. So we'll see like which statistic they talk about here. I don't know, like there's always one news about, oh, China's economy is dying. It doesn't really. So let's go this one.
Long-running property crisis and Trump's unprecedented tariffs, the Chinese economy has held up surprisingly well. Domestically, declines in property investment have been mostly offset by increased investment in high-tech manufacturing. And while exports to the US have fallen somewhat, they haven't fallen as much as you might expect. And Chinese producers have apparently been able to offset any decline by just redirecting their exports elsewhere, including to Europe. Nonetheless, in the past month or so, the Chinese economy has shown new signs of strain, and a combination of debt and deflation take their toll on industry. So in this video, we're going to explain how the Chinese economy outperformed expectations over the past couple of years, and what's gone wrong. Have you ever wondered how much money TLDR makes each year? Or who's funding our journalism? Well, we think transparency is super important. So we answer both questions in our recent video. It's linked in the description. So to understand China's current economic woes, you need to understand how the Chinese economy is fundamentally unbalanced. In short, GDP is defined as the sum of four things: government spending, business investment, household consumption, and the difference between exports and imports. In China, consumption accounts for a lower than average share of GDP, while investment and net exports account for a higher than average share. A recent analysis by the University of Groningen found that, in 2019, household consumption accounted for 39% of China's GDP, compared to a global average of about 60%. For context, in most large European countries, household consumption accounted for about 50% of GDP. In India, it accounted for about 65%.
Yeah, this is the thing, right? Okay, I'm going to say two things about this. You can't really compare Europe to China. No country in Europe can compare to China when it comes to GDP. Same thing with India, basically. You can't really compare it with China in base of GDP. But there is also another element that, yeah, China will have issues with the stalling, economy because of it. It relies on, like selling things outside more than they consume. And how India is not going to be a factor so much because of this element, right? But then again, India's $4 trillion economy, China is 20. So yeah, even though they're not like consuming that much, they're consuming enough in that scale, and whatever they're exporting so much. It's $20 trillion. No European country can come close, right? Germany is like what, $5-6 trillion or something. Yeah, so this is like first and second spots are really flying high. America, $30 trillion, that's insane. China, $20 trillion, that's insane. And then comes Germany, which is like 5-6 trillion. And then I think is now India with 4 trillion or something. Yeah, so they're stalling, but stalling at $20 trillion. That's where it's stalling. So it's still a high number.
And in the US, it accounted for about 70%. This is largely because, through a variety...
That's insane to me. But then again, that could be because of military-industrial complex. Yeah, but like 70% domestically consuming $30 trillion economy, like, okay. But then again, like, yeah, I think military industrial complex must account for that. Otherwise, like, what are you making? What are you consuming? Damn, that's something.
Mechanisms, including an undervalued currency, China essentially underpays its workers, keeping them poor and keeping China's exports competitive. Conversely, investment accounts for a disproportionately large share of Chinese GDP.
Is that fair?
World Bank data.
Is that fair? Like, okay, like this, you can say same thing about India, but like it's different place. Rents are different. land costs are different, how things like domestic things like food and everything, grain is like different price than it is in Europe or America, right? So I don't know, man. Like in China there could be similar thing. China make their own shit, they have their own things, own rare earth elements and everything that could be cheaper for them. The phones they make is cheaper because everything they gather it's just there and it's cheaper. Labor is cheap, material is cheap, it's just cheaper to live there, right? So it's like cheap labor, but I'm pretty sure like they can get by because everything's cheap as well. That could be that. I don't know that for sure. I feel like that could be the case.
Data, for instance, suggests that investment made up 41% of Chinese GDP in 2023, compared to a global average of 23%. Again, to give some more context, in India, investment accounted for about 33% of GDP, and in the US, it was 21%. In and of itself, lots of investment isn't a bad thing, but too much investment can lead to a country producing essentially too much stuff. This is sort of what's happened in Chinese industry. China produces more stuff than its population can consume, which is why it runs persistent trade surpluses. But it also happened in China.
I mean, everybody knows that China is world's factory. Everything and anything is probably made in China, if not Thailand, probably. I don't know.
Property sector. Chinese property developers essentially built too many houses, hence those infamous videos of China's ghost cities, and then had to take out unsustainable amounts of debt.
Okay, I don't think Ghost City has to do with I'm pretty sure there's like cultural warfare, isn't it? Like they made a lot of things and like Chinese government steps in and like there's many, you can't buy it. Like there's literal Paris, somebody created Paris there, somebody created Germany there. But because of cultural, like friction, CCP enters the chat and like you can't really buy anything type of way. Pretty sure that's the case. Those are 1.4 billion people. Like, yeah, I mean, you shouldn't have empty houses at that point.
To keep themselves afloat. As you might remember, to remedy this, in late 2020, the CCP introduced the so-called 3 red lines, which essentially limited how much debt developers could take on. This was terrible news for heavily indebted developers like Evergrande, and triggered a dramatic slowdown in China's property market. Now, usually you'd expect this sort of slowdown to lead to a decrease in overall GDP. After all, a property crisis...
I'm not gonna lie, at least that's something. In India, like there are major mega giants who take on multi-billion dollar as debt, can't pay out and runs to London or something. There was a whole company called Kingfisher, whose owner basically had an insane amount of loan with India, and he just basically ran to like England, and he lives in England right now, which is like weird to me. Doesn't India have like a treaty with England, just like with many other countries, where they can just like bring back people? They can ask for them to like, what is it called, extradition treaty or something? I'm pretty sure. You can just ask them to like, okay, there's a criminal, bring him back. Like, can't they do that? Like, I don't understand that, but he just lives there. There you go.
Would usually mean a reduction in investment, as developers pare back construction, and potentially a decrease in consumption, as homeowners cautiously pare back their spending in reaction to declines in property prices. However, this didn't really happen. Instead, as this very helpful graph by Brad Setzer at the Council on Foreign Relations neatly illustrates, investment was essentially redirected from property into
Didn't I tell you graph, guys? TLDR news. So, okay, so real estate went down. But yeah, auto manufacturing infrastructure rose.
manufacturing and infrastructure. This was largely a consequence of the CCP's practice of setting GDP targets for provincial governments. For context, unlike the rest of the world, where GDP growth is measured as an output of statistical authorities at the end of the year, in China, the central government sets GDP targets for provincial governments at the beginning of the year. In other words, GDP isn't just an output, but also an input. Under pressure to hit their GDP targets, local governments essentially just redirected their investment spending from property into other industries, especially politically favourable ones identified as new productive forces by the CCP. For a while, this strategy seemed to be working. While there was indeed a mismatch between...
Isn't that kind of dangerous? Because if it's organic, yeah, GDP is great, but if you force it, you can do a lot of economical fuckery, let's just say, to inflate those numbers. But in the end of the day, you didn't gain anything. And you can just move that along quarter by quarter. That's kind of like dangerous, isn't it? Like, I don't know.
In consumption and production, Chinese producers were able to bridge the gap with exports. In other words, selling their surplus to foreign consumers. This helped boost GDP growth and allowed China to establish market dominance in high-tech industries like EVs. Even when Trump's tariffs kicked in, which obviously made it harder for Chinese producers.
I mean, China, like I said, all rare earth elements are not rare if they're in China. That's the saying, because that's true. When it comes to EV and the battery tech, there's a lot of like elements in that. China has monopoly on it. Elon Musk was saying like we're going to be fucked if China decide to not give us that, right? There was like whole, like China basically said like I'm going to tariff this if you're going to tariff that, basically flexing against USA, which kind of worked. Trump removed a lot of tariffs against China, which, yeah, obviously.
Producers to sell to the US, exports held up impressively well, with Chinese exporters redirecting their surplus to Europe and other markets in Southeast Asia and Latin America. You can see this if you break down China's most recent export data by region. While exports to the US have indeed fallen compared to 2024, exports to the rest of the world have held steady or increased. However, this strategy always felt somewhat unsustainable. Other countries were neither economically able nor politically willing to absorb China's surplus forever. And even though exports were holding up relatively well, China was still clearly producing too much, as evidenced by the brutal price wars we saw.
I think China can benefit by increasing relationship with India. Why do I say that? India is growing in overall demand. Just people are getting richer. There is more money to throw around. But at the same time, Make in India movement is kind of working. We are making our own chipsets now. Like it's the factory that is being made is very close to where I live. But it's not at the scale of you would expect because India is a democracy. It runs really slow. China's like India is kind of reliant on China already in a lot of ways, like leisure ways. A lot of smartphones that has been sold in India is probably Xiaomi, right? So Xiaomi's off brands like Redmi, Poco, which is Xiaomi brands basically. There's a way too big market. Samsung, but also Xiaomi. There was a time where Samsung completely dominated. Now it's half and half basically when Xiaomi is increasing. So India is relying on like a lot of Chinese phones and things because India can't just like create a powerful smartphone company like that. So like China and India could really benefit from each other, which is basically they're trying to do here. So I don't know. Yeah, like this just makes sense. India will do like Make in India thing, but it's going to be very slow. Until then, like like India and China can benefit.
In industries like solar panels and EVs recently. Price wars aren't necessarily bad, but in China they contributed to the pre-existing deflation crisis and encouraged affected companies and the local government supporting them to take out unsustainable amounts of debt in an attempt to survive the price wars. This is a big reason why China's total debt now stands at over 300% of GDP, up from about 200% only a decade ago. Anyway, it now looks like this strategy is indeed running out of road. Prices can't go much lower, and affected companies can't take out much more debt, which is why, according to the latest data release from China's National Bureau of Statistics, in July, growth in both manufacturing and infrastructure investment declined dramatically. More generally, both industrial production and corporate investment fell markedly, with fixed asset investment falling from about 4% growth year on year earlier this year to 1.6% in July.
Okay, I'm going to say two things about this. Okay, first of all, how economy works is like there has to be upward trend or whatever stable trend you have going on. Doesn't matter the reason. If it stalls or falls, there is a real chance that it's a domino effect that will never recover because of many butterfly effects, let's just say it without going into detail. At the same time, this shit happened because the way China directed like how to do business, how to grow GDP. So it was an upward trend. It's like a bubble. It was always going to go down when they corrected, which they're trying to do here, like capping the debt thing. But like I said, if the growth stalls, there's a real chance that it will stall for a very long time. If anything, it might plummet before it can recover, which can be devastating. There's a reason in COVID time people say like, go out, buy things. Even government, basically American people are like, government will give you money. Go ahead, spend. So economy doesn't stall. It's like that highway effect, right? A car, all cars are going at 100 miles per hour. Great. One car breaks, and that creates this kind of like a snake effect, right? Where like whatever car braked and basically like ran away again, it creates this bubble effect, like this snake type effect that one after another cars will break because they just have to. That's how it works, and there will be massive traffic jam just because one car braked. So this is how economy could become a problem.
And industrial production falling from 6.8% in June to 5.7% in July. This is in part because domestic demand has weakened further, with year-on-year growth in retail sales falling to a 6-month low of 3.7%, presumably at least in part because consumers are responding to deflation by paring back their spending. Weak domestic demand will obviously make things even harder for China's embattled producers, because, well, weak demand makes it harder to sell stuff. Weak demand also seems to have restarted China's property crisis, with home prices in urban areas, which seem to have stabilised somewhat in late 2024, resuming their declines in the past couple of months. All in all, this is yet more evidence that China needs to boost consumption as a share of GDP. Excessive investment, whether it's in property or manufacturing, seems to be ultimately unsustainable if it's not matched by domestic demand. More consumption would both rebalance the economy and perhaps even ease trade-related tensions with the rest of the world. After all, more domestic demand would mean both fewer exports, and thus less risk of the politically toxic overcapacity we're seeing at the moment, but also more imports from foreign producers.
Okay, when China was weak and not really rich, it made sense how it became this factory of the world where there were bicycles everywhere, nobody had car, it was very weak looking. But just in a decade, everybody has cars at a level where government has to pick and choose who they give license to. Every building is a skyscraper. There are highways and like interstate level highways everywhere. Every city is like shining now. You are $20 trillion economy. Now is the time to not be world's factory. Like, it's not good for India and any other country when I say this, but for China, stop being world's factory and be your own thing like how USA does. Make your shit. You are rich. Consume yourself. You have resources. Build economy that way. You don't need others. You don't need to rely on others now. It's not like you need America to be America's factory to grow. You're already grown. $20 trillion. Everything you have is like shiny and rich. Consume your own thing. Like, this just makes sense. It's not so easy to switch things, how it's working. Government needs to force that, like, okay, spend more, buy more, do more things. And like innovations are coming out of China as well. Like, there's a lot of things Chinese people are doing, even in like tech industry, which is like kind of innovating. Huawei, they were banned by USA, but they're still doing insane shit even to now, like triple folding phone and everything. Even Xiaomi did that concept. Xiaomi was an OS, right? Like operating system when it started in 2011. Look at them now. Look at how insane they are. They're trying to do what Samsung is doing, be everything. TV screen, everything. They're trying their hand out on a military and shit. Samsung is so insane. They have everything, including military, helicopter, and everything. You can think of Samsung has it. Xiaomi is trying to do that as well. Huawei is also like doing something like that. So you just make your own shit, buy your own way. Like, why be world's factory when you don't have to, type of way.
Which would encourage other countries to see trade with China in less zero-sum terms. Now, other China-related news has been covered across the media landscape, including Xi Jinping's planned hosting of Kim Jong-un for China's military parade next week, with 147 sources reporting on it. Taking a closer look, you can see that 20 of these sources come from the right and 40 of them come from the left. It's clear that there are some differences between each side of the political spectrum, with right-leaning outlets focusing on geopolitical.
Yeah, well, go to original video page and from there support this channel. Yeah, this thing was whole thing. It wasn't like Kim Jong-un, Putin, Xi Jinping doing that thing. Yeah. Pretty sure Modi went there like a day ago and just went back or something, didn't attend this specific like parade thing. Yeah. Trump lost his mind, I guess. Like, oh, I guess this is how you do it. Okay, fine, this and that type of way. Oh, India's gone like to dark side. What are you talking about? Russia-India relations have been there for like multiple decades. China-India was never enemies. There was friction. But let's get this straight. Like, India buys a lot of things from China, including smartphones, everything. Chinese company like Xiaomi has actual factories in India because the demand is so high. So, yeah, there's always that relation. There's always economical relationship. So, India and China was never enemies. They're not buddies now, but they were never enemies. They're like, it's business relationship. Come on. I mean, obviously, tensions have eased because the hand is forced. US has forced China and India to shake hands, basically, because US is coming after both of them. So yeah, I guess that's a silver lining. I don't know. Alright, well, why China's economy is stalling? Watch channel TLDR News Global. If you like my channel, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.